Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have Chip Munn, Managing Partner of Signature Wealth Strategies, on the show today. Chip started his career as a teacher, but decided to go a different route and pivoted into a career in financial planning. His firm has grown quickly and has multiple office locations and over 30 staff members. We talked at length about his decisions to grow through acquisition and adding more offices to the firm, which is in large part due to the small population of the town they first started in. We discussed his firm's strategy for handing off relationships from more senior, retiring advisors to younger advisors looking to step into the lead advisor role. We also talked about the structure of his firm and how he's leveraging learnings from the book Rocket Fuel, which has been mentioned on this show a couple of times, to build the foundation for a large firm. I felt like Chip gave an awesome perspective that we don't share very often on this podcast, and that is of life as the owner of a large and growing firm. You might be afraid of growth because you don't know what it looks like being the CEO of a 30-person company. Well, hopefully this interview gives you some insight into that reality. How much money do you need to launch your own firm? That's a question we've got at XY Planning Network hundreds, if not thousands of times. To answer it once and for all, we developed a free budget template that accounts for the many variables of your first year in business. Along with the template, successful XYPN members opened their books for us and shared how they did it, what they spent, and what they do differently. Our first year budget download is an incredibly valuable resource for anyone considering launching a firm of their own. Download it for free at www.xyplanningnetwork.com/budget. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/189. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Chip. Hey, Chip, welcome to the show, man. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So I'm excited because we haven't had very many folks on the show that run a practice the size that you do. Really, the only one that I can think of would be JD Bruce with Abacus Wealth that's running a similar size or a little bit larger practice. So for listeners' benefits, can you just sort of give me an overview of the practice? How many clients you serve, how many advisors you have, where you're located, and then we'll dig into the details.
Sure. So we are an independent firm associated with Raymond James Financial Services. So we are in the independent broker-dealer space. We are kind of headquartered in Florence, South Carolina, and have now 9 offices in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Kentucky, about $1.1 billion assets under management, roughly 2,000 households or so. And interesting, we moved into the independent broker-dealer space from a regional broker-dealer 3 years ago. And then we had about a $300 million practice at that point and have expanded from 1 office to 9 and from about $300 million to 1.2 billion in the last 2 years.
Wow. Talk about a growth rate.
Yeah, it's been a heck of a ride. It's a lot to digest all at one time. It's been a lot of fun.
How much of that growth has come from acquisition and how much of that is organic growth of, going out and getting clients and growing assets on the platform?
So for us, the vast majority of it over the last couple of years has been inorganic. So it's been acquisition, or we actually have 3 offices that are satellites. So they are affiliated with Signature Wealth, but we didn't acquire the equity, so we don't own them. We just partner with them and provide kind of a shared services model that they use. When we came over to the independent channel from a regional broker-dealer, the interesting thing for us is as we were able to begin the process of expanding our footprint, because we're from a relatively small town in South Carolina, and we knew that in order to grow, there was only so much organic growth going and getting a new client that we felt like we were going to be able to to do given our geographical location. And so we felt like we were going to have to expand our footprint. And so I have a partner who lives in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and always expected that that would be, the direction that we would go. We would get a few more clients there and we would kind of build that way. And about 6 months after being a part of Raymond James Financial Services and partnering with them, we had an opportunity I had a former wholesaler that I knew that was considering Raymond James. And we kind of had the conversation of, well, if you're going to consider Raymond James, why don't you just do it with us? We have a lot of the infrastructure already built out. They're in Charlotte, North Carolina. And so it really kind of grew from there. And we have a partner now who was a regional director for Raymond James Financial Services for 15 years or so that came on board with us to help us grow. And so, to be honest, for the last 2 years, because of the opportunities that have presented themselves with acquisitions, organic growth hasn't been the top priority. We've had our hands full with some other things.
So, sort of skipping ahead a little bit, just curious, do you have a partner or did you have a pot of money and family wealth or wealth that you had built up that you're using to buy these practices, or are you financing these deals? Do you have sort of an open line of credit at this point? Because you're buying at a pretty good clip. So I feel like, is financing just that easy in our space, or do you have sort of an edge there?
I think that it has gotten better. And so I think that there are a lot of options available now that probably weren't available 10 years ago. I think also when it comes to acquisitions, you have a lot of different structures that are available. And I think that, understanding the potential for different structures. And I know that, your listeners will know that, you talk a lot on your podcast about young advisors who come in and work and, hopefully if folks keep their word, gain equity and get to do those kinds of things. And there's an institutional way to do that by, again, in our case, an outside buyer will say, has the ability to work with a firm owner on a structured buyout that had they planned ahead and built out their own succession plan in a very similar way to the kind of structure that they'd have had with their successor internally. So there is the ability to go out and get, at least for a portion of it, lump sum financing. And then there are also various forms of earnouts and structures that can be set up with each of the individual firm owners, and they're all a little bit different.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll dig into some more of that as well here in a bit. Can I get sort of the rundown of your career path and how you ended up sort of starting your own firm? Based on your bio, it's clear that you did not always know you wanted to be a financial advisor. So what was sort of your winding path to becoming an advisor?
Sure. Originally, out of college, I graduated from Clemson University, go Tigers, home of the national champions, for those of us who care about football. And I graduated with an elementary education degree. I actually wanted to be a teacher. If you have kids, you have kids. So if you think that raising kids is hard, spend time with 25 that aren't yours in a room that you can't leave, and you have very limited amount of discipline, and you're 22 and they're 12. And so that was I taught school for a year and was, about halfway through. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I wasn't going to teach a second year. And so for me, I had an interest in trust and estate planning because I had a family member who had a negative experience back in the late 90s with the death tax. And so I had an interest in that, thought I wanted to go to law school. As it turns out, law schools are not particularly excited about elementary education majors. And so, the other opportunity that I saw in trying to be able to help other folks not deal with that situation that my family member had dealt with was in the world of financial planning. So with an elementary education degree, I interviewed at a handful of places and was able to talk my way into a job at a regional broker-dealer back when I was 23, so 20 years ago. From there, we spent the majority of my career at two different regional broker-dealers. Went through a merger and experienced that, and spent the majority of my career at a regional broker-dealer. And roughly 3 years ago, we left the regional broker-dealer because we wanted to be able to do things that, whether it was marketing or inorganic growth and acquisitions, that we just weren't able to do in that space, needed a more flexibility and autonomy. And so we found our way into the independent space.
Fantastic. Yeah, I want to dig into some of the independent broker dealer and just what the differences are and that sort of thing, because I think that'll be really interesting. So, but you said you split off 3 years ago, so that would have been 2015-ish?
February of 2016.
2016. I keep forgetting it's 2019 now. So there we go. Thank you for that math. And how large was the firm at that point in terms of staffing, clients, assets?
So when we opened Signature Wealth as an independent office, we had roughly $300 million in assets, about 9 team members, and 1 office, and a partner who kind of worked from home, but 1 physical office, 4 advisors, 9 total team members, and $300 million.
Okay. So that's what you left with the broker dealer. How many partners or owners were there at that phase of the business?
3.
So how did y'all have that discussion? Because I know the structure is a little different depending on where you're at, but like, did the 3 of you just come over and say, okay, we're just going to split the business 3 ways, so you're each 1/3 owner, or did it have more to do with client assets you were moving over?
We had done that when we were in our previous broker dealer. We were all a team. We've been a team for, my original partner and I. So when I joined the business in 1998, I joined as a solo advisor, and within about 6 months as a 23-year-old, I realized that folks my parents and grandparents' age were not particularly excited about giving a 23-year-old former elementary school teacher a lot of their money to invest. And so I looked around the office. My partner, one of my partners now, but my original partner, Scott Mitchell, and his dad were teamed up, kind of a father and son team, and I convinced them that their focus had always been investments. So managing stock portfolios in the oldest kind of old school sense of the word, and they didn't have an interest in financial planning. And so I convinced them that it was in both of our best interests to let me do the planning and specialize in that, and let them handle the investments. And that was 20 years ago. And we, Scott and I got to a point where we were 50-50. It's very difficult to work in a business where, inequality amongst partners sometimes can cause problems. Other people would argue that, sometimes equality can cause problems. So it's definitely a very sticky thing. But when we added a third partner, we kind of worked it out internally that we would be a third, and a third on the revenue back when we were part of the regional broker dealer. And so it was just pretty easy for us when we started Signature to keep it that way.
So, one common misconception is when you're 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, it means all decisions have to be unanimous. So decision making and ownership can be very different. So do you all have a structure where you say, look, the 3 of us are going to have to agree on everything, or have you drawn lines around accountabilities, who does what, just to keep the ball moving forward?
we definitely have role responsibility. So again, there were 3 partners in my original practice. There are now 5 partners as we have expanded. But in both cases, we have role responsibility. So in my day-to-day practice, my responsibility is not only more managing the business, but it's also more of the focus on financial planning. Scott, my partner, still runs all of the investments. So he handles 100% of that. So we have role responsibility. We do in each case, though, have a structure for how best to then make decisions. And I do think that that's a lot. It has been for us. And I think in general, there's a lot of trial and error that goes into that. But we also have really put a lot of effort in that as we've grown and grown quickly, having more structure around the decision-making process is a big deal. And we're actually still in the process. We recently, within the last couple of weeks, brought on a COO who had been responsible for technology and operations in an executive vice president role at our old regional firm. He actually joined us a couple weeks ago to come in and really continue building more structure around the decision-making and communication process. Because I think that in any business, regardless of size, whether it's a single office or even just a solo advisor and an assistant, every time I heard a statistic one time, and I don't remember exactly, but that every time you add another person, you exponentially grow the number of relationships involved in an organization. And so, it has been an evolution and probably will always continue to be, to make sure that the decision-making process is one that everybody can be clearly communicated. It's not necessarily always consensus, but it is a situation where everybody has an opportunity to have their say. We typically have historically been able to find a common ground 95% of the time, but it does have, it is an important part of running a business for sure.
Yeah, it's one of the interesting things as we've gone through EOS, the entrepreneurship operating system from traction and really implementing that in our business. One of the things they talk about is that a danger of small businesses, particularly as they grow, is ownership seems to supersede accountability. And so at any time, an owner can swoop in and say, no, we're going to do things a different way. And they're really big on, look, ownership just means you get financial reward from being an owner. That gives you no ability to actually make decisions in the business. You can help set strategic vision for, where you want the company to go, but it doesn't mean you can just like drop it and do anything you want, and that you need to be very clear on accountabilities, who's in charge of what, because there will be situations, and Michael and I and Raul and all of our director team, run into these situations where you just can't predict something will happen. And you say, all right, well, that didn't really work. I feel like I got stepped on there. This is my job. So, let's draw another line and redefine that line, and it's just this sort of constant evolution, which is really fun. But it was a mind shift for me to switch from like, well, this is half my company. I can do whatever I want. And the reality is like, as you grow, you really can't, because if you do that, then you really harm the people and put them at a disadvantage that work for you. So, you really need to back off and let them do what they do and be really clear on what you do for the business.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question. We have loosely, so I couldn't more highly recommend the Traction book or the Traction series. We too have loosely structured from the EOS model, the visionary integrator model. And I think that it offers, their concept of an accountability chart, who is responsible for this, and has been a big help for us in. There is a difference, again, between, like you said, I think you're 100% right, the financial benefits of being an owner and being an employee, being a team member inside the business, going back even to the E-Myth. I'm a big, Michael Gerber had a big influence on me from a structural standpoint a long time ago, that it is, there's just a difference. And sometimes it requires a lot of talking about those differences, but it also is what makes a business sellable over the long term or manageable over the long term is the ability to divide responsibilities and to also be able to end up in a position where certain things that as an owner you don't want to do anymore, you are able to disassociate with, some of those responsibilities by adding another team member. And, again, for me, that was very evident from the book Rocket Fuel, which is heavily influenced. I know, Alan, that I've heard you mention that a few times. That was a very clear indicator for me that it's okay to just be who I am and be good at what I am. And I think that EOS system allows for, an awful lot of clarity. I think clarity in any organization, but particularly as you grow, is a real big deal.
Yeah, I am a huge fan of Rocket Fuel. I'll say it probably doesn't apply to folks until they're hitting sort of 5 or 6 team members or employees. There's just a lot in there that isn't going to apply to you. But I do think it's interesting. It would have been an interesting read for me when I was first starting out in helping to understand myself. Because do you fit into either the visionary or the integrator role at the firm now?
Yeah, it's weird to say, but I am firmly in the visionary role.
It is a weird thing to say.
It's uncomfortable, and it is humbling on I think for both a visionary and an integrator. But I think that you nailed it in that the more important, even if you're not trying to determine the structure of an organization, is to be able to say there are different types of leaders, and whichever one I am is okay.
Yeah, it is sort of an interesting term to be like, I'm a visionary, because it does sound very like pompous and pie in the sky, but it is what entrepreneurs and your founding CEOs, I'll say, as the company grows and you end up with a CEO that gets brought in to run the company, it does change. But most entrepreneurs fit that visionary role, but being able to say, like, this is my role, this is what I'm great at, and this is what I'm terrible at. And that's why I have a COO who is our integrator, who we had on the podcast a few weeks ago, Raul, and he's an integrator. And when we both read the book, we looked at it and we're like, wow, I do not want your job. And
that's right. You develop a healthy respect for the other person, for sure.
You do, because there's always this awkwardness about like, oh man, should we does he want my job? Like, does he want to be CEO? And like, I'm stepping on his, and he's thinking like, Alan's stepping on my toes doing my job. And when you read through it, you're like, wow, I really don't want your job and he doesn't want mine. And that's why this works. But anyway, so, growing firm issues, for folks that just starting out may not be something that you're dealing with yet. But I do still think it's an interesting book to read through just to help you understand your mindset. Because some entrepreneurs are integrators. Like ultimately, some entrepreneurs are not visionaries, and that's totally fine. There are a lot of different ways to start a business. So going back to sort of when you initially broke away from the regional broker dealer, why, 3 years ago, there were a lot of options. So why Raymond James over just going completely independent RIA or one of the other dozens and dozens of platforms that are out there? Like, how do you make that decision, whether to overlay a platform or go independent?
So for us, I think there are a lot of reasons that anyone could make a decision, I think ultimately in deciding either to go RIA and completely in that space, or in choosing a partner to affiliate with like a Raymond James or one of the others that are out there. I think ultimately what you have to do and what we did was to determine exactly what it is, very much like we would do with a client and their financial plan. What is it that you're actually trying to accomplish? What's the vision that you have for yourself and for your company, and where is the best place for you to accomplish that? In our case, the kind of what I'll call, full RIA fee-only space was a difficult place for us to get to at the time, and still would be, because our practice was founded in 1970 originally by my partner's father, and we still have a lot of legacy business that wouldn't fit that model. And so then For us, it was a matter of taking a look at, we actually worked with Mindy Diamond and Diamond Consultants on really taking a look at what the landscape was and who some of the different potential partners were, and trying to determine the best way for, or the best fit for our team and our practice for what it was that we were wanting to accomplish. In terms of why Raymond James for us, we felt like, I'm a believer that, I think it's a Steve Jobs quote, that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And so for us, finding a company to partner with that had a technology integration that was, and a commitment to continuing that we're going to continually be developing the technology component of both the client and the advisor experience, was a big deal for us, with the concept of, wanting to be able to grow a footprint. They were definitely very supportive of that. And then the ability to help with some of the structure of, an acquisition space. They have an entire M&A team or department that we're able to get help from. And so with the things that we were wanting to be able to do, they checked all of the boxes that were important to us for what we wanted to do, without us having to go out. And of course, in the broker-dealer space, the last thing you're looking to do right now, especially, or from a one office standpoint, is to try to build your own broker-dealer. So that wasn't going to work. It was really more a matter of finding kind of the right fit for us, just like you would any other kind of partnership.
So talk to me a little bit about that, because that's something that does come up for folks that are transitioning away. They had this legacy business stuff from the 70s and 80s, really old school stuff. So what types of policies or investments and that sort of thing do you guys have on the books that would prevent you from dropping a broker-dealer affiliation? Like, what are the things that still require a broker-dealer?
Well, so, we have a decent size legacy annuity business. We don't really, over the last, 5 or 6 years especially, we don't sell a lot of new ones. It's rare now. But so the majority of our new business is, your typical, I'll say fee-based, because I have to be careful with all the, terminology, but, is fee-based. And that's really the direction that all our new business is and has gone. We do have a large portion of the original business that would be, things like old mutual funds with 12B1 fees, or annuities and the revenue associated with those kinds of things, that the financial transition from one model to another, and really having clients who are of a different generation for whom the concept of fee-based financial planning, or even just the fee-based compensation, is a stumbling block for them to do business, in part because of, I think, just the way that things have been. When we're talking about folks that are, of a, 70 or 80 years old, many of them are much, much less comfortable than the, Gen X, Gen Y, even baby boomer clients, for whom now, I think for all of us, the fee-based and or, fee-for-service model is pretty commonplace. We still have clients who've been with our firm for 40 or 50 years that's just not the kind of business that they care to do. And they've been with us. We wouldn't have had an opportunity to do the things we've done if it weren't for the fact that they've been clients of the firm for a really long time. And so, for us, abandoning them because we wanted to evolve in how we charged and how we did some things wasn't something that was an option for us.
No, that makes sense. And that's why we're hoping CFP board is going to be changing, hopefully, some of their rules around the definition of fee only, just because my personal opinion is having old trails that you service is very different than creating new commissions. Like continuing to, you may actually be harming the client, moving some of those to fee-based accounts and away from the trails, just depending on the structure of that agreement, that sort of thing. But, hopefully we can get some of these policies into no load or, be able to transition some of these products that, we've had for forever just to be able to clean the slate. But the industry hasn't quite caught up. It's on the way. We're seeing more and more no load insurance products that are actually competitively priced and that sort of thing. It's going to take some time. So that's, it's why we like to continue to reiterate, like, we don't think people that sell products or are servicing old products that were sold are evil or anything like that. It's just, for us as a business, because we do require all members to be fee only, for us as a business, it's just really hard to tell the difference between a firm that is, 99% fees and occasionally sells an annuity when it makes sense versus someone who's giving away financial planning for free to try to hawk, variable annuities on seniors with 15-year, deferrals and things like that. And without auditing the firm. And then we got to charge a bunch of money to be able to go and audit. So we haven't found a way to really do that effectively, but it is interesting to see the landscape sort of shift.
For sure. And I think, first of all, a couple of years ago, I had an interest we started an RIA as an outside business activity from Raymond James for the purposes solely of financial planning, and don't qualify to be an XYPN member because we also own an independent practice with a broker-dealer affiliation and receive trails and commissions on that side of things. So I do have a high, while I was disappointed, I wasn't able to take advantage of what I think is a great platform that you all have built for RIAs. I do have a high degree of respect for the amount of integrity that you guys put into the process of vetting, because again, it is, unfortunately, none of us like people who hawk bad products to inappropriate people. And, I think that for those of us who are on the independent side versus the fee only side, the folks who do the dinners, seminars, and sell, 18-year surrender annuities, that they give all of us a bad name regardless of what what affiliation we have and what we call ourselves. But I definitely am one who respects the standards that you guys set forth and the fact that you stick to them, because you're right. There's no way to, without spending, running a business for you all trying to dig to that level of detail it just wouldn't make good business sense. So I think y'all have done a good job with that. And I think you provide, for what it's worth, a great service to the people who are able to, or especially those who are just starting out wanting to build something from scratch. I think it's a great thing that you guys are doing.
Well, I appreciate that. It is a lot of fun, because entrepreneurship is a ton of fun. It really is a fun ride for those of us that have been on it. It doesn't always work out. A lot of times it doesn't, but nice to get that support while, being on that roller coaster. Switching gears a little bit, you've grown quickly. So you said you had 5 staff members or 9 staff members just 3 years ago. You've grown to over 30 now. A lot of those are advisors. One of the things that has been mentioned before in other avenues that I've read about was just like your development of those advisors. And you mentioned in our pre-call an advisor success scorecard. So can you talk to me about how you develop young advisors? Because the general consensus across the industry is, I'm going to bring in a young person, I'm going to train them for a couple of years, and they're just going to leave and go start their own firm. So why bother? And so, but I'm not sure that a lot of firms really know what to do with young advisors, young talent when they get to the firm. So how are you sort of developing those advisors and ensuring that they're on track and headed the direction they need to be in order to be successful with your firm?
Well, I think that the first thing you have to do is you have to realize that it's an investment, not an expense. And I think there are a lot of senior advisors who view adding a younger team member as an expense and not looking at it from a longer term lens. As I mentioned, I got into the business when I was 23 years old. And at the time, and I think even now, getting into the business at that age was unusual and difficult. And I think, unfortunately, many of us, as we have grown in our careers, forget that we were the young person at one point. And so for me, our program has been built over the years in part based on things that I didn't like as a younger advisor. I came into an established practice with a father and son, and we had to work through those things, and I had to work through them as the younger person. And so, for us, it has been about really being committed to developing that next generation of advisor, in part because it's an opportunity that I was given that frankly I probably didn't earn or deserve. And a lot of our younger advisors weren't necessarily, in finance. One of our younger guys was in marketing. One had a bit of an accounting background. One sold at one point industrial tools. And so, I think that you have to be willing to find the right people and give them an opportunity, and then look at it as a developmental process that we all had an opportunity to go through. And really, again, for me, having been the younger advisor, having been in a situation, for example, our younger advisors, a key component of their compensation is salary driven, because a lot of younger folks, at least, I did. I had, my son was born within about my first year of the business, and being in what then was a commission kind of business is a tough thing, or build it. It's even worse, honestly, trying to build from scratch a fee-based business when you only recognize 1/4 of the revenue when you actually bring on a new client. And so that ramp up is really difficult. And so, for us, it's looking at how do we develop these folks for, if you think that you're only going to have somebody in your practice or your business for 2 or 3 years, if that's kind of the mindset, then it's very difficult to be able to develop people. But for us, we think that a key is taking that longer term approach, letting them be able to learn how to do all the different parts of the business, and then figure out over time. We're big believers in unique ability from the strategic coach kind of mindset and community, and being able to find situations where, for me, Alan, I have 3, my wife and I have 4 boys, and, it's important for me to have the opportunity with them that my partner had, to come and work with his dad and to be a part of a longer term business. And for me, from a growth perspective, all of our boys may not be folks who client facing roles are what they're meant to do. That's not what they're wired for, but wanting to be able to create company and an organization that allows for opportunity for people who are investment folks, centered folks, and want to be a part of the team in that way, like my partner has been for years, or folks who are more, business development and, some of those kinds of things like I am. We want to be able to give people an opportunity to kind of look at all of it and find a way to grow and contribute. And I think that that's been our process, is teaching them all of it and letting them kind of grow where they're planted.
So you make a really great point around, being flexible in where you're bringing people in from. If your whole goal is to go hire, CFPs with 10 years of experience, so therefore you're getting someone in their mid to late 30s, with 10 years of experience in financial planning, good luck. Like, the only way you're getting those folks is you're buying them, because they're just not available. Like, by then they've settled in, they found their firm, they know where they're headed, they don't need a job anymore. And so, like, if you want those folks, you're going to have to groom them, which is awesome. So,
yeah, well, the alternative is that you could very easily go out and get somebody who has developed habits that don't fit your culture. And so it is, even if you were to bring in somebody like that, somebody who has gone out and spent 10 years of experience are not created equal. And so I think that there is definitely a lot of benefit to kind of bringing folks in from different backgrounds really young it is a lot more. It's a little bit like the difference between acquiring a practice or going out and getting a client, or in our case, having an advisor or a team affiliate with us versus an acquisition. To train somebody from either straight out of college or with no industry experience is a lot more work. But it's also, you're not spending any of your time undoing things, and it really gives them an opportunity to learn the way that you do things and the way that, again, you believe financial planning should be. And it is, it has been for us, we've had 6 over the last 10 years, younger advisors come in, and it has been good for us to be able to structure it that way. It is definitely nice. We have run our first internship program last summer, and I'm hopeful that one of those folks will join us as a full-time team member when they graduate later this year. And so it'll be nice to have somebody who's had some experience in one of our offices who has come out of a financial planning program. But, so they do have a leg up from having some formal education. But, I don't, you're right. I think if you go out and your interest is in bringing in people with 10 years of experience who can already develop business, you're going to have a hard time, or you're going to, it's a business decision you're making to spend a lot of money.
Exactly. So real quick about the internship program. I know I get a lot of questions about this. What are the types of tasks that you give an intern? Because historically interns were, they'll come in and scan papers and sort mail. And I think we're finally past that. We recognize that they're valuable human beings and can contribute to the firm. So what are the types of tasks and projects that y'all have your interns working on, so they're providing value and they're learning a lot? Sure.
We were fortunate enough this past summer to have had the opportunity to work with a fellow by the name of Josh Harris. Josh is actually, I met Josh in the XYPN Facebook group. It just so happened that he's a professor, works at the CFP program at Clemson. And so we were fortunate enough to have Josh work with us on developing an actual program. So what it is that they would be doing, a combination of academic work and projects. So he was very, very helpful in helping us have some structure to that, because if you don't, they're just coming in, and if you don't have anything for them to do, it's more work to have them there than not. But things like research projects, they did a lot of research on topics that we would turn into content. So not a pure marketing function, but utilizing their skills in research was a big help. Also tracking down various forms of information. So not filing, but calling and requesting information from different companies, sitting in on meetings, building out a lot of two of the interns worked in an office that we had fairly recently acquired. So they worked with a younger advisor on getting a lot of those things up and running. We have a process we use when we acquire an office now that was developed kind of as a part of that first acquisition that we use to kind of transfer knowledge from an older senior advisor to a younger advisor, whether it's inside of a practice or part of a transition or an acquisition, that they were active in helping take that information as it came in and get it applied to client records, both digitally and otherwise, and really kind of let them sit in on client meetings, work through a lot of the planning software, because particularly the two who were in the office where we had done the acquisition were rising seniors in college who had a lot of academic training. And so having them do too many there were certainly some administrative components, but having them, we wanted to be able to let them have a good experience and learn what it was like to be part of a planning practice more than just doing filing and administrative things. So we tried to involve them as much as we could, and Josh was really good about providing some structure around how best to combine that.
Yeah, and my recommendation is, you can have an intern in a client meeting on their first day. And I know that because what feels to be many years ago now, I was in a client meeting on my first day as an intern when I worked for Rick Kaler. And so, they don't have to say anything. They don't have to do anything. They can just sit there and watch, because it's amazing what you can learn by just watching, real financial planners do real financial planning. And I can guarantee you it looks nothing like what they teach us in the case studies in the CFP program. So, those are the types of things that I think advisors get hung up on client privacy and that sort of thing. And the truth is, you may know that one or two clients that would really prefer that intern to not be in there, but for the most part, they can be in there.
Well, you can certainly ask. I mean, you can ask the client if they're coming. I mean, even now with folks who are not interns, but who are younger advisors, I'll ask if it's okay for them to be in the meeting. And I can't remember in 20 years somebody saying no, but it's respectful to ask, and it makes everybody more comfortable. And I think that the other thing in our business speaks a different language. So for interns or for younger advisors being in meetings, I do think that you are exposing them to the language of the business that for somebody coming in new is a complete shock. I mean, it's like learning any other new language. I think that, what you think a term means isn't what it means. And I think there's a lot of that there's a learning curve that just allowing them to be around and immersing themselves in the environment, they learn an awful lot just being around.
Yeah, totally agree. One question I have for you is, you're hiring a lot of younger advisors. Is it Richard Branson quote, train them so they can leave and treat them so well they don't want to? Why does someone want to sell their firm to you or stay working for you when it's so easy to go launch their own business? What is your firm providing? Is it compensation? Is it equity? Is it you just got people that don't want to own their own business? And does that make it a challenge if you need them to run the business one day and be an owner? Sort of how do you frame that, when you're looking to either buy or acquire a firm, or, you're trying to retain some of this young talent that you've been cultivating?
So I think that's a challenge for any business. We certainly have had our share of it. I think that ultimately, when you're hiring younger advisors or people who, in our case, aren't advisors yet, the beginning thing that we try to offer is an opportunity and a great culture to work in. I think that's foundational. I mean, I think that's, almost like a hygiene factor that you should. So I'm not trying to take credit for that as a great thing, but I think that for us early on, it is the opportunity to grow and learn. And now as we have grown, the opportunity to, if you want to, expand into opportunities to run your own office, to be able to really experience some of the benefits of ownership without the headache of ownership. So, the ability to have some of the flexibility and autonomy to run an office or a practice, but without some of the financial responsibility that particularly for younger folks is not something they're willing or able to take on. And then a big thing for us as we are growing is developing career tracks that give folks clear paths to, what would be next for them, whether that's in the client-facing, advisor role or in a support staff operational role. And, for an advisor who is, taking over an acquisition for us or running an office, we're actively working on developing kind of that path to partnership that I think that I've heard you talk about, to make sure that, over time, we're building something together. We're big believers that we're better together. And so, whether that is our working together in terms of, most of our advisors have a role, and they have something that they are particularly good at. Our younger advisors who operate in an office, their responsibility is dealing with clients and not all of the other things that go along with, whether it's office operations, dealing with staffing, in many cases, the investment or the planning kind of background work that's required. We handle a lot of that internally so that they can spend their time just providing good advice and service to the client, so that the client experience is good. And I think that our responsibility, much like that Branson quote, is to make sure that our team member experience is equally good. Because I had a conversation with somebody today, and we talked about the staff turnover. We were actually talking about college football and how, if you can just keep all your coaches together and they're pretty good, you're going to be more successful than those who don't. And I told him and really believe that we had a team member leave in the last 6 months or so. And when you are dealing with somebody that you've put years of emotional investment, and time into, it's kind of like your top 10 clients all leaving on the same day. And so, those are feelings you don't want to feel very often. And you want to make sure that you are doing all the things that you can to create an environment where people have opportunity. I think that most young people leave for, lack of understanding or clarity about what the opportunity is, or lack of opportunity itself. And so that's a big deal for us, is, making sure that we have clear paths for all of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I totally agree that having that team member leave is tough. And, it's hard to, let's say it's easier said than done. The sign of a great leader is the number of leaders they produce. And, if talk about college football, the way we really determine success of a head coach, right, is you look at the tree of coaches they've created. And it's hard to see them go, but it's also kind of fun to see them go thrive and know the part that you played. And for our own businesses, it's tough and it hurts, but if that's their path, then, it's hard to argue with it. So I know it goes both ways. And again, it's easier said than done, but it is kind of cool to look at some of the coaching trees that exist in the NFL and college football, just to see, how much of it has been spawned from just a few great coaches that were great mentors.
For sure. Well, and I think that I can only speak for me, that I get, with our young advisors, I get as much pleasure from seeing them succeed as I would. For me, a lot of our young folks are, they are the layer or the group in between me and, my oldest son is 19. So if ever, and a freshman in college, and if ever he wanted to be in our business, they're intentionally between me and him, so that, the notion of him working, for me is now out the window, because I intentionally wanted to work with the kind of people and I want to treat them the way that if ever he ended up, or one of our boys ended up in our business, these are the people who are going to be mentoring and working with and training that generation. It's not going to be me, because they don't listen to me at home. So they're surely not going to listen to me at work. And so, but you're training up the people who are going to train. I'm 43. So if I'm working with a 25-year-old younger advisor who is eventually going to be a 32-year-old advisor training my 25-year-old son, if it went that way, I think that it's just a mindset of stewardship and trying to position them in a way that they'll be able to help the next group of people. There aren't enough young advisors. I think that we have a responsibility to be active in making sure that we play our part in that. And he's 19. So for 19 years now, a big driver for me is the notion that, hey, one day these kids may want to be involved in this, and I want it to be something that's good for them. And, frankly, it's my responsibility as a leader to create an environment and to pour into people who are eventually going to pour into others.
So, sort of as a final topic, one of the other things that you are well known for in your firm, and one of the things that you're really passionate about, is around pairing up these younger advisors with older advisors and handing off the business and handing off the client relationship, which can feel it's a difficult thing to do. And it's really difficult to hand off a relationship. So can you talk about some of the strategies that y'all have implemented in order to help be able to retain client relationships as, advisors move on, or as you're buying books of business and introducing younger advisors into the firm?
Sure. For us, it is, one of the things that we learned pretty quickly, not only from my experience from years ago, but particularly with our first acquisition, is that sometimes that curse of knowledge is you don't know all the things that you don't tell anybody else. And, it's hard, whether it's in a CRM or otherwise, to take all of the years of conversations that an advisor has with the clients and the intimacy of that relationship. There's a tremendous amount of value there that if you don't find a way to capture as much of it as possible, we feel like and have felt like you're losing a lot in that transition. And so after our first acquisition, one of the things that we developed was a list of kind of questions, kind of a document that we use with our younger advisors who are going either into a part of a transition internally in a practice where a younger advisor is just taking on some new relationships, or in an acquisition where they're taking on kind of an entire office. We developed a list of questions and a tool that we use with our younger advisors to be able to work with a senior advisor to make that transition. Our experience was in talking with senior advisors to say, if you would, how about take some time and make notes on everything you know about a client? It is kind of like asking somebody where they want to go to dinner. They may not know exactly, but if you give them three choices, they can pick, or they can tell you where they don't want to go to dinner. It's what we found was giving prompts and asking questions made it much easier for the senior advisor to let some of that information pour out. And I mean the kind of information that's not on a new client questionnaire, or it's not about risk tolerance. It's more things that allow the younger advisor to make connection. We're in a relationship business. And so for us, it's our belief that the sooner a younger or a newer advisor can make a connection with the client and to transfer some of that, trust and kind of institutional relationship knowledge, that, it makes everything go better. The chances of the client continuing to work, they feel like they're more well known above and beyond, their risk tolerance and their liquid assets and those things where you check a box. So we developed that, and what we do is we use Copy Talk as a dictation service, and the advisor can fill it out on paper. But what we found to be more effective with our senior advisors, me included, would be to, we use a Copy Talk service and allow them just to use that as a reference to go through and answer all of the questions that they know in a 5 or 6 minute period of time. With the right prompting, they can get a lot of that information out that is helpful, that a younger advisor might not otherwise think to ask. And a senior advisor, as much as they want to help, might not think to tell you.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's really hard to hand off that knowledge. And to your point, if I just sit down and say, like, okay, I'm going to write down all the things I know about this client, you're not going to get much. So really cool that you have a prompt to take people through to be able to hand that relationship off. And, those are the types of things that feel a little silly or arbitrary to get started. But it's like, write down the 7 questions, and then you'll realize there was an 8th that you missed, and then you can add the 8th, but you don't know the 8th if you don't write the first 7 down. So just, get them down and then keep adding to it and refining it. And over time, you continue to hone it in and make it work for you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and if you do it 3 or 4 times and you add 2 questions each time, you've gone from 7 to 13. And I think that's, again, the benefit of continuing to refine things is, yeah. And again, we have a list of, I don't know, I don't remember the number, but 30 or 40, if not more, that, I'd be happy to share with you if you'd like. And folks can add to it from there if they'd like to. They can just go to our website. That one is on our joinsignaturewealth.com. And it is something they can jump on, download, and just add into from there.
Okay, awesome. And we'll try to link to that in the show notes. So other than, sort of some of the things that we've talked about, obviously you've been in hyper growth acquisition mode over the last couple of years, which sounds like an exciting ride. What are the big projects that you have over the next 12 to 24 months? What are the big things that you're going to be working on?
So for us, in addition to the acquisitions, we also have a handful of practices that have affiliated with us. So they use some of our, whether it's marketing or compliance or benefits, some of those kinds of services. So for us, a big part of that is building out the available services and making sure too, when you grow through a growth period like we have, we added 4 offices, whether acquisition or affiliate. So, and I think it was 2 of each since last October. So in the last, few months, we added 4 offices. And when you go through growth, we believe it's important to stop and take a breath and really make sure that your systems work. So for us, I think that'll be a core component. And then the other is now turning our focus to marketing and organic growth. One of the scariest things I think for us as advisors is the notion of a large market pullback. We experienced some of that at the end of 2018. And I think that my experience from the late 90s is, particularly for the younger listeners, is it is a phenomenal opportunity to go out and build new relationships and get new business. And so given the climb of the market and the success that people have had, I think that it's reasonable to believe that we're going to have more volatility, and volatility is the friend of the younger advisor and the proactive advisor. And so for us, we think there's a big opportunity to go out and focus on growing the individual practices, not only being out in the community, but also really actively in the social media marketing. We will be doing a podcast or 2 and, really being active from a visibility of clients to bring in new clients to the individual practices. We've had a lot of success within organic growth. And I think the next, 12 or 18, 24 months is going to be focused also on organic growth to be able to take, some of these younger advisors that are out working either in my office here or in our other offices and putting them in a position where they have more people to talk to. Because I think that one of the areas where we can help is, for senior advisors to actively help bring in new business for young advisors to work with and help them develop and find new clients and new business.
Okay, fantastic. So as we're sort of coming to a close, looking back over your career and thinking about our typical listener being the younger financial advisor, maybe they have their own firm or think about starting a firm. If there's one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and give your younger self, what do you think that piece of advice would be?
Well, I think that I would reiterate something that I think you guys do a good job of pointing out, which is to be yourself. For many years in our business, there was a particular mold or a particular look that a financial advisor needed to have. You needed to serve a certain group of people. And as I have gotten older, one of the things that, we spend a lot of time talking to our clients about, we call it their signature life, but really I've heard you say it, I think, as, just helping people live their best life. And you can't do that if you're not being authentic. And I think a lot of times, again, going back 20 years ago, there have been plenty of times in businesses where you you're expected to be a certain way or dress or act a certain way. And we certainly, I think that it's important to be authentic and to always be, developing the kind of business that you're going to enjoy being in and that you're going to be and working with people that you like. And I think that fortunately over the years I've been able to do that. But I do think as young advisors, oftentimes, we're pointing in a particular direction because that's where the industry says that things should be. And so I'd encourage my younger self to be authentic at all times and to develop the kind of business with the kind of people that I'd want to work with for 20 or 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, my whole goal has been, build a business that I would actually want to work for. I just build a business that if you needed a job, you would go work for your firm. And I think most business owners would not actually be happy working in the firms that they've created because the culture isn't something that they would like. They've sort of held the culture or, at the CEO founder level, and they haven't really allowed that culture to permeate the entire company. So
for sure. My goal actually, for what it's worth, Alan, my goal is to build a company where I can do all my speaking engagements in a t-shirt. I'd like to have the Alan Moore, company. I think that speaks to authenticity. I just think that you're 100% right, that you want to build a business that if you, or in my case, if your children were to ever be a part of, that you'd want it to be something that you or they would want to work in. I think you're 100% right.
I love it. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show and share the growth that your company's experienced and what you're working on. It's really exciting to hear about, and hopefully things continue, and we'll be excited to check back in here in another year or two and see how it's going. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good talking to you.
How much money do you need to launch your own firm? That's a question we've got at XY Planning Network hundreds, if not thousands of times. To answer it once and for all, we developed a free budget template that accounts for the many variables of your first year in business. Along with the template, successful XYPN members opened their books for us and shared how they did it, what they spent, and what they do differently. Our first year budget download is an incredibly valuable resource for anyone considering launching a firm of their own. Download it for free at www.xyplanningnetwork.com/budget. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.